I started this quilt to deal with grief, thinking it would give me something positive and challenging to focus on. I decided I would make a baby quilt for a friend who was moving to another country. And as the stack of blocks grew, I started to feel better. But it also made me nervous that I would mess up those beautiful blocks. My perfectionism took over and the project stalled. But their moving date kept getting closer. So I had to push through and finish the quilt top. Now it's ready for the last few steps. Quilt top is done. Now I need to decide on what I want to use for backing. I have a couple of options, so let me take you through them. My first option was to piece together a couple of fat quarters from my stash, but since I didn't have that much time left, I decided to go for a piece of fabric that I had in my stash for about 10 years. It was about time to use it. And luckily, after folding it in half, it would fit my quilt top. And the only thing I had to do to make it work was fold it in half, align the self edges, stitch it, and give it a final press. I measured all the pieces sort of roughly, so the backing is sewn. I have the batting, which is a bamboo cotton mix, and I'm going to do a quick press of the quilt top and the backing because it's a little bit wrinkled, and then I'm ready to start the quilt sandwich. And then after that, I still need to decide how I want to quilt everything, but we'll do it step by step. And I found myself saying that a lot. Just focus on the next step. Because if I wouldn't, I would worry about all the steps to come and all decisions still to make. But just focusing on the quilt sandwich, that I could manage. I think it's flat enough. Yeah. So next step is the backing. But I'm not quite sure if there's a wrong and right side. They do look different. And that was me realizing that both sides would end up in the quilt. Meaning, it didn't really matter. And I didn't want to risk researching it and getting stuck behind my computer, distracted by, random stuff on the internet. I think it looks pretty flat. Okay, so the plan is to stitch across through all the blocks. And I'm wondering if I need to the distance is 10 to 20 centimeters maximum suggested on the packaging for the batting. So am I getting enough coverage? I'm not sure. Yeah, I think I like the look of the diagonal lines. And how many inches is that? That should be enough. I think that's what I'm going to do. And now I also know where I can and cannot put the pins. Okay, yes, I think I have a plan. All the pins are in, but before I do anything else, I think I need a break. I had some dinner and I feel sort of ready to tackle some quilting. So I took a look at some colors for thread. Okay, so the options are this ochre yellow, the green, and more neutral gray. And I think I like the ochre one best. It sort of disappears on the green and it matches really nicely with the colors in the warmer blocks. I will give this one a go. If I'm unhappy with it, I can always rip out the stitches and try again. I think for the back I'm going to use the same color. It will stand out more, but I like how it looks with the blue. And alternatively, I can always use maybe the gray. Choices. White is also an option. Let's see what that looks like. That's an option too, I guess. Maybe I'll try that one. Listening back to myself talking about those thread colors, I can hear I was so tired, but I just had to keep going to get it done on time. Because I would much rather hand the quilt over to my friend than send it as a package to their new address. To make the whole quilting process go a little bit smoother, I wound an extra bobbin and I did a check to see if I like the stitch length and the thread tension. When I was sewing the quilt top, when I was piecing all the blocks together, I was worried that some of the seams were not nesting, but in the end, when I started sewing or quilting the quilt sandwich, I did not encounter any problems. Maybe it would have been different if I did it by hand, but my sewing machine had no problem at all. Looking back, I realized I had so many unnecessary worries. Oh well, maybe I'll learn, but knowing myself, I guess not. Okay, so the lines are certainly not straight everywhere. But I think it looks better than I thought. Now I have to do the other direction as well, but I think I need a bit of a break and I'll see. I'm not sure if I'm going to do it tonight or later this week. But I could feel that looming deadline and decided to push through. I didn't feel like I was rushing, but it would have been nice to savor those last phases of the project and take my time with them. I'm very happy with how it turned out. I started this quilt for a couple of reasons, one of them being having something to do while I'm grieving, and last week was pretty rough. Last couple of months, a lot of things happening, and this week as well, and it's been such a comfort to be able to work on the quilt. You know, otherwise I would have been worrying, doom scrolling, and having that project to quilt and to work on was so much better. It's not like it solves those problems, but it certainly makes it a lot more enjoyable to pass the evening and to work on something that's truly bringing me joy to work on. It's definitely worth it to put in all the work. Now, quilting everything, it was a bit of a struggle getting it through the machine. The first direction of stitches that I did, I noticed that it was a bit difficult, so I put chalk lines in for the other direction. Now those chalk lines were gone once I got to them, or mostly gone. I could see like a subtle hint of them, but I did think it helped me sew a little bit straighter, and I also had a little bit more experience on sewing and putting it through the machine. So it was a good step. Now the next step is binding, and I decided I want to use the scraps. I've also contemplated using sort of the back as binding, because I have quite a bit of fabric around the edges that I'm not going to use otherwise. And I already know I would have enough, but I think it's too different. So what I'm going to see if I can do is salvage all these scraps that I have and turn them into a binding. Now I do have one piece that's a little bit larger, which is this one, which I bought for the quilt. I like the color, and it combines really well with all the scraps that I have. So I think I need to start measuring and see how much I can get out of this one, and like the bigger scraps, if I have enough width to go around and finish the quilt. I'm thinking maybe I should sew around the edges first, because here it's all open. I think I'm going to do that first. 22. 23. 23. 1,23. Klopt ook wel. So I need 5 meters of binding. Now the width I want to go for is 2.5 inches, I think. And then sew it on, I think like this, with a 1/4 inch seam, and wrap it around and stitch, or the other way around, stitch it like this. Yeah, I think this is the better option. And I think the 2.5 inches should work. Here is the plan. I'm going to take all the strips. I made a little test piece to see if I like the stitching and if I needed to switch the thread tension. I'm going to remove that so I can also add it to the quilt binding. So I really want to use as much scraps as I can. I did decide that I am going to need to draw the line somewhere, so scraps that are less than 1 inch are not going to be worth it. I will try to see if I can get away with using scraps that are 1 inch. But I think that's something to figure out once I get there. Pieces that are 2.5 inches wide, because that's the width I need for the border, and then at least 1 inch long. This one is big enough. We shall see, but I'm going to trim pieces to size, and hopefully I have more than enough. I think I have enough. I think I have more than enough, actually. I still have to sew all the pieces together that I just cut, but I think I can manage, and I think it's going to look fun. So here are all the cut strips. Together they should be, what was it, 4 or 5 meters that I needed. And then I still have a couple of scraps over there that I might be able to use if I just need a little bit extra. Right, 5 meters of binding. I really hope this is going to work. I pressed open the seams. I think I have enough. Now the real trick is positioning it so it doesn't have all the small pieces on the corners. And hopefully I can finish the quilt tonight. Taking a break was a good idea. I'm back and I just laid out the strip along the edge of the quilt, and I think I can sew it on without the scrappy parts ending up on the corner. The only question I have is, do I need to start on the back and fold it to the front, or do I want to sew it on the front and then fold it back? I need to decide now. Maybe I need to watch Kate from The Last Homely House or Karen from Let's Get It Done Quilts to see how they do it. Those two channels I've watched the most when it comes to quilting, and it's just wonderful. So much information, and gave me the confidence to tackle this. So okay, I'm going to take a quick YouTube break. I need to sew it onto the right side of the quilt and then fold it back. I'll sew it on and then I'll decide what the next step is. The first pins. I'm not doing a particularly neat job in clipping everything, but I will readjust once I get there with the sewing machine. I like how it turned out. In the beginning I was a bit scared that the quilt would be too perfect, which is funny now because I've seen all the imperfections that emerged or that happened along the way, and I don't really mind. I think a quilt like this, which is supposed to be used, maybe abused while playing around, dragging it through the garden, you won't really notice it. So the binding is on the quilt, but now I need to decide whether I'm going to sew it on by hand or sew it on with my sewing machine. Anyway, I'll check back in once I decide or once I finish some next step and let you know what it is. I was hoping to start earlier today, but I ended up spending the entire day in the hospital I had a slight injury on my hand and it ended up taking so much longer, but I'm really looking forward to doing the rest of the quilt. I wanted to take the afternoon to make photos, but I'm not sure if I can manage that. We'll see. So yesterday evening I managed to finish about half the quilt. I did 2 corners and then I sort of finished my thread. And just the process of doing it by hand, once you get in a rhythm, it's such a nice and calming activity for me. So I really don't mind sewing like meters and meters of quilt binding. And luckily for me, I still have about 2 meters to do. As I place these final stitches into the quilt binding, I find myself feeling both excited and a little sad. I started this quilt months ago as a way to deal with grief. and it's been a faithful companion after many quiet hours behind the sewing machine. Each piece of fabric holds memories of little mistakes and small victories that kept my hands moving forward when my heart felt heavy. I'm excited to see the finished quilt going off on a new adventure, but I'm also a little sad that it's no longer waiting for me at my sewing machine. It's a feeling that reminds me of listening to a great audiobook, eagerly pressing play whenever I can to discover how the story unfolds, while also wishing the pages would never run out. It's almost as if the quilt was a character in my life, a silent witness to newly unlocked skills, inevitable mess-ups, late evenings of quiet concentration, and even a few tears. But now it's ready to go on a new adventure, and so am I. I'm sure the completion of this quilt will mark the beginning of many more stitched stories and memories, and thread by thread, stitch by stitch, piecing together more than just fabric.